Well, it only took 8 episodes, but I've now got a car that's driving and reliable, gets me around, taken it for a couple of hour drives here and there and had no real issues, other than the starter is a bit dicky, but it eventually starts. If not, there's always a hill around. So now I'm up to the point where everything runs. I've just got to make it neat and tidy, and I find this is probably where the internet sort of stops helping you. Once the car's running, all the guides and such sort of no longer talk about anything that's going on with it, but there's still a fair few bits and pieces that need to be tidied up, cleaned up, and made so it's, you know, a car that could have come from factory or is at least factory-esque. So that's what I'm going to focus on today, making things all a bit tidier, neater, and work like it was designed from BMW that way. Before we go getting into the actual work, thought I might show this off. This is the M52 small steering wheel. I think they're 370mm. I got this delivered the other week from a guy called Dicky. He's from Indonesia. He's on Facebook. He posts things all over the place. Good quality wheel, really happy with it. I got it mostly because of peer pressure, a little bit because the smaller wheel's a lot nicer and I've always wanted it. So yeah, shout out to Dicky for getting it to me pretty quick. The other thing I want to mention is, if you do take your dash out, make sure you put the top steering column plastic back on before you put the dash back in, because if you don't, you're going to be like me, and now I'm going to have to slightly raise the dash up and undo the bolts and such so I can get the top plastic bit in, because there's not a whole lot of other ways to do it. So yeah, if you do pull that off when the dash is out, make sure you put it back in first. Time to get happy with the side cutters. So, as I said in the intro, the wiring that goes to this plug down there that goes to the coil packs is way too long because of the way that the cars are laid out differently between the E30 and the E36. So I've already cut the end off that, and I'll show you why. Basically what I want to do is use the standard plug, make it as factory as possible, but still shorten up those wires. So what my plan is this is the plug that I've cut off, and what I'm going to be doing is writing down the location of all of these wires. They're the numbered slots, same as the C101 plug. I'm going to use the crimp removal tool that I used with the C101 plug, because they actually use the same pins. So I use the pin removal tool. If you need to know the part number, I've already got the part number listed in the C101 video I did previously. So I'm going to remove those pins. I'm going to shorten up the wires on the loom, and then I've got new pins from the when I did the C101 plug that I'm going to crimp on and put in the same positions as this, and should work same as factory, look factory, but just be a whole lot shorter and a whole lot neater. Something you're going to want to be aware of if you are going to be doing this style of plug like I am, is that there's actually another step to removing the pins and putting them in that the C101 plug didn't have. And that step is, you can see probably the circle bit inside the plug there, in between the inner and outer pin slots. What you need to do, and there's 2 divots on either side of the circle bit, is you need to get pointy nose pliers, put them in those slots, and turn that circle in an anti-clockwise direction. And what that does is it actually unlocks all the pins. And then you use your normal pin out tool like you would with the C101 to get the pins out. And similar sort of thing when you put them in, you leave it in the anti-clockwise direction, put the new pins in, and then move the circle bit there in a clockwise direction to lock them back up. So I spent a long time to figure that out. So an entire day, and broke. This is the original plug, and I managed to break it trying to put pins in and out. So just be aware, because if you know that, it makes your life a hell of a lot easier. Here's the final product. All the pins in there, the boot on it, and then for the rest of it, I just went around it in insulation tape. Then I put some conduit on it. I went around that in insulation tape again. All come up looking pretty good. Basically looks like it's factory, so pretty happy with that. Now we've just got to mount it in the right spot. here we have the final product. So you can see the new loom. Obviously all that needs to be tidied up still, but the new loom comes down through that hold point there into the plug and then back to the coil pack. So fairly simple, and you know, holding something that before was flopping around was way too long. I do need to put a cable tie. It's a bit hard to see, but that's rubbing just on the bottom, not of the container, but the bottom sort of hose there from the clutch slave. So probably need to put a cable tie on that just to stop it rubbing. I might in the future at some point in time get a longer bolt there for the clamp and move it so it's not as close to the chassis so it doesn't rub there, and it may also help with the clutch slave reservoir, but for the moment it's not going anywhere. Car doesn't get driven daily, so it's not going to rub that much, and I'll fix that probably at some other point in time in the future, but for the moment it's mounted, it's safe, it's not going to end up in the manifolds. Another little bit of information I'm going to share with you guys is what to do about the grommet where the DME harness goes through the firewall. So obviously you need some kind of grommet there to stop the air from in the engine bay and any moisture or anything like that coming through. And I got rid of mine accidentally because I sold the grommet with the engine loom with the engine, with the M40, so I don't have one. You can't buy them new because they actually come as a part of the DME. So this is my solution. This is a Heltec grommet. You can buy that from the Heltec website. They're like 15 bucks. And yeah, they do a really good job of keeping everything out. Everything's sized really well. I'm not sure if it's a 2-inch hole that the Firewall has on the E30 or if it's slightly bigger, but either way, this does a good job of covering it. The only thing that you really need to think about is, unless you plan on pulling all the pins out of the DME connector, you're going to need to cut the grommet. And this one I've already cut, but it is pretty hard to notice. It's just up the top there. And when it's in the car, it actually sits quite tight against each other, so it's a pretty good seal. And I just used this tool, well, the top tool there, which is a radiator hose cutter. Just put it through the middle and cut that in two. So yeah, that's another solution for you guys. And here the grommet is in place. So another thing that I've modified in my ever-present quest to look a factory as fuck is I've mounted the diagnostic port back in the standard E30 position. So this actually isn't too difficult. On the E36, this is mounted off the right-hand side strut tower, and it's got a bit of plastic that sort of sits off the side here, and that's how it mounts. But I wanted to put it back in the factory slot. Luckily, the actual diagnostic port itself is exactly the same. The only bits that are different are the mounting bit for the E36 and obviously the side that it goes on. So what I've done is there's actually a nut under the bit that holds the lid on here. There's a nut, and that undoes in an anti-clockwise direction. It's a bit of a bitch to undo. You got to sort of have two vices or two clamps, and it's actually quite tight. But yeah, you get that undone. It comes off just like a normal thread, except obviously it's plastic. And when that comes off, all the mounting bits for the E36 also come off. And then you just put it back in the factory position, tighten it up, and then you can put the little lid back on it so no water gets in there. The only thing is that the wiring loom is a bit long, at least for me, but I should be able to tuck that back up into here and make it a bit shorter. And yeah, wouldn't even know it's not meant to be there. So the last thing I needed to mount in the engine bay is this valve here. This controls the flow of fumes from the charcoal canister to the engine, and basically is an emissions control. So from factory, the valve is mounted by a little bit of metal, a tab that goes through the rubber that sits around the valve there, through that little square slot. And so what I've done is tried to replicate that with my own bracket. So you can see here, this slides off, and you've got the bracket that I've built. It just mounts on, I think it's one of the standard power steering mount bolts from the E30. And I've just welded on 2 little bits down here so it won't go any further. I put those bits on like that rather than just doing a bead of weld because they sit flat, and it'll mean that it won't slowly open up the hole at the bottom there in the rubber and try and slip over the top of it. So yeah, just a fairly easy little bracket with a hole in it, and that's all mounted. Just going to take a moment to talk about the exhaust manifolds on this thing and the exhaust that's on it, because I haven't really spoken about it too much. Basically what I've got done is the standard M52 manifold, and I got an exhaust shop to make them kind of like long tube headers. They go past the steering knuckle and then they join the rest of the exhaust. Is pretty tight from what he told me. I didn't do it myself because it involved a bender and welding, and yeah, it just seemed all a bit too hard, so I got someone else to do it. But yeah, they made it all work. They just extended their standard M52 manifolds and then made an exhaust from there. I originally had 2 separate pipes all the way to the end of the exhaust, and I had that for a little bit, but I couldn't figure out how to get a cat that would be good enough to pass emissions when I had to do the emissions test. So I eventually went to 1 single cat. So this has a system that goes twins into a single cat, then twins all the way out. So I don't reckon it quite sounds as good. I'll probably change it up a bit in the future, but I need to get this emissions test done first before I worry too much about that. So that's another episode down. The car's a lot tidier. Everything's actually bolted in place at the moment, or securely fastened. So I'm a lot happier about that. Didn't really get around to doing the cables that go to the battery. I think it's one of those things where it was so easy to do, I just didn't do it. So I got all the tools to do that. So that's one thing I've got to do to finish sort of tidying up the engine bay. Otherwise, yeah, everything's pretty good. The car drives really well. The things that I've got to get to now is I've got to make the heater valve not leak. I've got some ideas on how to do that because the car's got no heater in it at the moment, and it's going to need that for the inspection, the compliance inspection, but also because it's getting cold and I don't really want to be freezing when I'm driving around at night. So I got to fix that. May or may not do the aircon before the inspection, but also have to do need to do emissions test and generally just tidy up a few other bits and pieces before I take it over. Take it over Regency here, which is the inspection for the client compliance on the engine change. So yeah, got to do that, and also want to do things like new pads, new rotors, and a few other little bits and pieces. Also, I'm going to be in the process of becoming a homeowner, so I've probably backed off a bit on this because we've been looking for houses, and I'm going to have to do some work to whatever house we get. So yeah, it's a good thing that it's mostly done and I can drive it around pretty easily. So because I'm going to be busy doing homeowner stuff, whatever that entails. So yeah, I'll see you on the next episode.